Welcome to the podcast for Boomer Women, where we are embracing the journey. We are embracing the journey, but it does have its potholes. We're at that age where we're losing loved ones. Parents, obviously. Friends, unfortunately. Spouses and other loved ones. Those losses can set us back big time. My guest today had 3 of those losses in rapid succession. Her mother, her brother, and her husband. For a while, even her background in grief recovery couldn't dig her out of her darkness. Until Lynn realized that she had better start implementing her knowledge and her skills before she sunk so deeply into the abyss that she couldn't find her way out. You'll appreciate her empathy, her thoughts, and her suggestions if you have had loss or know it's in your future. And listeners, are you looking for a project? We have a great idea for you. Lynn is also looking at turning a hobby into part of her business for her clients. That might give you some food for thought. Listen now. A few years ago, a friend of mine lost her husband and both her sisters within months of each other. I remember phoning her up after the 3rd death and asking if life could get any shittier. It was 2020, and while none of the deaths were COVID-related, it did mean we couldn't gather and mourn or celebrate, whichever path you follow. We couldn't have a drink and tell the very best stories. My guest today tells a similar story, only it was her mother, her husband, and her younger brother. Lynn says grief isn't just sadness, it's disorienting. You wake up each day feeling like you're walking through fog, unsure if you'll ever find your way out. At this age, death is no stranger. Losing our parents is hard, our siblings harder, and losing a long-term spouse can really knock us for a loop. I remember turning 40 and my doctor saying it would no longer be my parents' friends passing, it would be my friends as well. And he was right. Cancer claimed a few, age claimed a few more, other illnesses. Just recently I gave a eulogy for a lovely woman in my life. When someone close to you dies, the immediate is pain, grief, loneliness, confusion, and as Lynn also says, I had no desire to move out of the cocoon I had built around myself. However, Lynn's career has centered around human development and grief recovery. So, physician, heal thyself about sums up Lynn's next steps. Lynn Banis,
Right.
Welcome to the podcast for Boomer Women, where we are embracing the journey.
Oh boy, aren't we? But yeah, yes, we are. Because if you think about your parents' friends, we're much healthier and busier and doing and accomplishing things in this world and adding to the world. So I think, yeah, absolutely we are.
Yeah, good,
So,
good. Now, I sort of summed up your story in 2
you did.
sentences. Could you share that time of your life with our listeners as much as you want to?
Sure. Obviously, it was a very, very difficult, dark, lonely time, although I have 3 daughters who were absolutely wonderful. But of course, they were mourning too, and the children were all mourning. But we did make it a family affair, which I think was very, very helpful. I had remembered that when my father died in the 90s, that after the funeral, we sat around in the living room and we got out the old slides of us every summer water skiing, and we started laughing and telling jokes. And I thought, you know what? This is really healing, because this is what Dad would want us to be doing. And so I kind of borrowed a little bit of that so that we would not only show the children that it was okay to cry, that we would be grieving, but we're a family and we'll do this together. So I think that's a really important thing that people often don't think about, because you're so devastated yourself that thinking about others just doesn't occur to you.
Yeah, at least if you're in the same room, I think that must surely help.
Yeah, it does. It does. And of course, that's one of the big points is in our society, it's so taboo to talk about death, dying, depression, all of those things. And since it's taboo, we've never been taught how. So when it happens, We don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. And unfortunately, most people just disappear out of someone's life, which makes it even worse and even more difficult to recover, because you've lost your other half, if it's your spouse.
Yeah.
Now you've lost friends, particularly those that are couples. They just don't call. You don't get to go out to dinner anymore, or
Well,
those
you don't
things.
want it to be contagious.
Maybe that's it. Not funny, but funny.
No, yeah, no, and I don't mean to be light, but
yeah. So it's a very lonely time. As a matter of fact, I remember sometimes thinking, this loneliness actually physically hurts. I ache so much, but I've never been one to just sit. And so I did mourn, for a year easily, but I was doing some things too. And as I kind of came to the end of that year, I realized that I had all of the skills necessary, and that my mission in life now is to help other people through it, because no one should have to go through it alone. Absolutely not. And, it's, I know that it's difficult for widows and people who have lost someone to say, this is where I am, and I wish I could talk to someone, or I need help, or think they don't need help. They can do it themselves. But the thing is that there is so much of the emotional and mental stuff that we need to work on before someone can become clear enough to make really good decisions about what they want to do with the rest of their life, that it's important to find somebody like me who knows what they're doing in that area and can take you by the hand and walk you through the process in a healthy manner. I have a good friend that wrote a book called Healthy Grief, and it's just, people need to get that book. Karen Kramer is the author, but it's, that's the thing. Instead of allowing ourselves to get stuck, which is very easy to do, to get stuck in that horrible emotional mess that you go through in the beginning. And it's not that somebody's doing something that's wrong. It's almost always that they just don't know what to do. Yeah. They don't know how to get out of it. And that's why somebody on the outside that can lend a perspective and see things that you might not be seeing really can help you move into a place where you can begin to see that, you know what, there is more out there. I don't have to stay here.
Right.
And, it's one of those clubs that nobody wants to join, but there you are, you're in it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listening to you speak, I think you should have written the intro to this episode, because you've touched on a whole bunch of subjects and issues that I do want to talk about. Okay. But let's go back to the beginning for you. How did you realize that you had the tools? Was it just over time, or?
Partially, but partially I was using them on myself too.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant for yourself.
When I heard myself saying, I can't. As a matter of fact, I wrote a little book called Says Who with my grandkids about self-limiting beliefs, and a little guy that goes on a journey and he comes across a rock that says, you can't do this. And somebody says who? So it's a cute story, but I found that really helps, is to ask yourself that.
Well, isn't it funny too that so often and I've got a whole collection of them. Sometimes it's the children's books, because the framing and the words are so simple. Yep. That it really does hit home.
It does. Yeah. And I think that we don't stop to think about, well, where did that belief come from?
Yeah.
We pick them up along the way.
Yeah. Well, let's blame mom and dad for one more thing. Now, once you started, well, what were my words? You picked yourself up and dusted yourself off. Did you manage to maintain a pretty steady course back to the real world, or were there setbacks, backsides?
It's definitely not linear. Absolutely not a straight shot. And when you can finally control the uncontrollable crying and that sort of thing and manage your emotions better, you still get these crashing waves of grief that just come over you, and you're not expecting it. You were doing just fine, and all of a sudden, boom. I remember being in a networking meeting, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a guy come in, and he looked like my husband, and I just lost it.
Yeah.
Those things happen.
Yeah. And I think the most obvious loss for our age group is the loss of a spouse. Now, some of those marriages are 40 to 50 years long. They've been together twice as long as they were ever single.
Mm-hmm.
And, so obviously life will never be the same.
No, and I tell a story of getting a second cup of coffee one morning and looking over at the sink and realizing there was only one cup in the sink. And for 35 years, at that point in the morning, there were always two. So I thought, I'm not just missing him, but I'm missing who I was when I was with him. And then, I was doing things, and I realized one time in the grocery store, I had 2 boxes of cereal, one in each hand, and I looked at them and I thought, which one do I even like? I've been buying these for my family for years, and it occurred to me the decisions I had made were always for us. So I didn't even realize I didn't know what I wanted, which I think is so prominent with people that are going through this. And not only is their mind a foggy mess, but everything is all jumbled and different, and of course then you have the neurological issues in your brain trying to keep you safe and rewire itself, and it makes it really, really difficult to think.
You mentioned the 2 coffee cups, and it occurred to me too that, when we lose a pet, it's really easy to talk about, oh yeah, I, threw a scrap on the floor today and then had to pick it up because the pet isn't here anymore. And it's so much easier to talk about a pet. But 35 years of your life, there's so many things that have become second nature, habit. And I'm sure those little tiny things prompted tears more often than the big things.
Absolutely. And I think that I believe losing a pet is very difficult. However, losing a spouse, you're losing your identity. Yeah, and I adore my dogs, but I don't identify as a dog mom. I did identify as a wife.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to make light of that.
I know
it was
you
just
didn't.
More that it's so much easier people just accept that you're going to talk about the dog, and they'll even talk about the dog, but the loss of a spouse, and it's like they look away.
Yeah.
So.
Don't know what to say. And so that's part of what I am doing too, is trying to educate the general public. What do you say? What do you do? What's okay? What's not okay? Because people either don't say anything or they say something that's extremely hurtful. Not on purpose.
Yeah.
But inadvertently, because maybe they've heard somebody else say that and say, well, that's the thing you should say. But, no, don't say anything. Yeah. It's better than saying something.
Yeah. Now, at this time of life, too, it could be that, we're talking about widows here, so we're going to stick with that sort of the husband has passed. They could have been caregiving that husband for the last couple of years. So, there is a certain relief that they're no longer in pain, there's no suffering, but that's an almost even bigger gap to fill.
You get the guilt.
Because now and all those hours, there's just no direction to your day anymore.
That's right. No purpose in your life anymore. And then the guilt comes that, I could have done more if only I'd done this, if only I'd noticed this. And, it's something that you do need to talk about, but you need to talk about it with someone who won't judge you, won't tell you what to do, and who will just sit with you if that's what they need to do. Just be there, because it's such a huge change. Now, in terms of the caregiving,
if someone's listening and they know that their spouse will pass away in the next few months or something, is there anything she can do to, I don't know, to prepare, to lessen the blow when it happens, prepare for the loneliness? Is there anything that she could do now?
Yeah, there's some things that can be done. I think one of this is not an emotional thing. Well, it's emotional having to do it, but going through all of the things, the legal papers and all that stuff to make sure it's there, those discussions need to take place well before anyone gets ill, because so many women are just left and they don't even know where the papers are. They can't get into the computer, so it's that stuff needs to be in place, because you're just so overwhelmed and upset that you can't think, you have no reasoning to figure out where something is.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I think that maybe journaling, how you're feeling for the day, maybe going back through and thinking about times in their life when they were really happy, or times in their life where they thought, gee, I would really like to do that. And write some things down. I don't mean necessarily make an actual bucket list, but, just start writing some things down and allow yourself to daydream. It's okay. You're not taking away from the person that you're caring for. And I think that if you can do some of those things, it might help you look forward a little bit, instead of, and I don't ever call it moving on. I think it's moving forward, because we don't leave what we had with that individual. That's part of who we are. And we need to build the life that honors, so we don't have to worry about forgetting them or any of the things that occur to people who are in the midst of grief.
As you said that, you reminded me that I, a couple of years ago now, was like a living caregiver for a woman who was palliative. And I had learned that back in the 80s, and prior to that, probably through the 60s and 70s, her and her husband had loved to go dancing. So on my playlist, I have, is it Rod Stewart's American Songbook or something? And so I would play that for her, and she'd literally lean back on her pillow, close her eyes, and she would sing every single song in that
Oh, that's
playlist.
great.
And it was just lovely. And so I'm thinking, like, for a couple to go back and reminisce and relive some of those really beautiful, joyful parts of their past.
Really, that's really important. That's part of you being able to say, I said everything I needed to say.
Mm.
I don't have regrets that I didn't say I loved you, or, gee, we had such a good time doing these kinds of things together and I loved it. And, those are all things that, and they in a way can bring you closer together, but they also will embed some positive, beautiful memories that you can lean on.
Yeah, and to refresh, I guess, the memories.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go like, oh my goodness, like what were we doing, when the kids were young or something, like after the fact. It's when you relive. And when two people are reliving a moment, it's bigger and more, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but there's just more pieces that come together when two people are remembering something. Yeah. Now, I'm glad you brought up the resource side of that, because that's a story that I hear from a number of people that I interview, that oftentimes for our demographic and older, most of the resources, I won't say all of them, but the investments, the retirement accounts, even the utility accounts were in the husband's name.
Mm-hmm.
And the wife may not have a clue where to start. And, so you're already grieving, but now you've got this whole other big mountain to try to climb.
And you don't understand a lot of it because it's in legalese, and you don't know who to trust. That's a big issue, because you do get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And so That's one reason why. And I do have a checklist. If you'd like me to send it to you, you can put it on the site that people can download and just take a look. Do I have these things? Do I know where they are? I'm glad to do that. That might help some people.
And as you say that, it occurs to me that it can be a perfectly healthy couple in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, that they should still discuss all that, figure it all out now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, then there's the rest of the family to think about, because family dynamics change. And some are positive, and a lot of them are not at all positive.
Yeah, everybody, I'm sure, I'm just speaking through my hat here, but so many people think they know what you should be doing,
yes,
including your children or your siblings.
Oh yeah. And then you get in the midst of this kind of thing where, your kids are saying, Mom, you need to move. You need to go out and see friends. And your mother, if she's still alive, is saying, aren't you going a little fast with this? And it's just like, And that's why people have to set boundaries. That's one of the things that it's hard to do, particularly when you are so desperate for companionship. But you've got to set boundaries, and that means you have to know what you want. What do I need in this moment? And that's part of that letting go of us and thinking about me. It's kind of funny, and it sounds I don't know, kind of weird, but I do get my clients to the point where they can really talk about this. And, I often say, when is another time in your life when you have the opportunity to create your new life? Doors close, but they open too. And very often when something is over, something new opens. And if you can guide that, if I can say, I want my life to look like this, how wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, I've done it just as a divorced woman, but knowing that your next moves are absolutely all about you, it can be freeing, it can be exciting, sort of the sky could be the limit if you allow yourself to dream.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be scary. And if it is, what I would suggest is go back and see what you're telling yourself, and then think of times when you've done something in the past that show that you're not afraid. You can do this, and we don't do that often enough. We just kind of get scared and pull back. But if you think back through your life, you've probably been through the same situation in different clothes, and you probably did fine with it, and so you can do it again. You've got proof.
Well, the thing is, even moving from single into married life brings a whole bunch of challenges.
Sure.
And, if you've been married for 35 years, obviously you figured it out and you found your way and you created yourself as a wife. So now you can recreate yourself in whatever form you want that to look like. Yeah. Now, you mentioned family, and I was thinking as I was preparing my notes that the other part of family is that our families are spread all over the globe now. So they may all come home, hopefully, maybe they can't, for the passage, whether it's, like the celebration of life or whatever. But then they all go back to where they were. And, there's time zones, and they're busy with their lives and all that stuff. And suddenly you've got another big empty gap in your
your life. And,
you have to fill.
I found that I thought my sons-in-law would be helpful around the house, but then I realized they've got their own houses to take care of and they have limited time and they want to be with their children. So, we need to reach out to the community and find people who we can hire or cajole into doing something for us, because we just can't expect somebody to drop what they're doing, what they need to do, and come help us. They want to, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll be right over." But then you realize they were going to take their kid to a birthday party, and so the wife has to, and it just it's just hard. And then you feel guilty again.
Well, and I'm going to speak up for the value of bartering, exchange. We still have things to offer if it's only, a, a chunk of banana bread, like
Yeah, make you
whatever.
some brownies.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of people that are happy to be fed through their stomach,
Yeah,
or to be paid through their stomach.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and most people are happy to help if they have the time and the resources to do so. They're happy to be asked information. I mean, if you want to figure out how to do something and your neighbor, say, well, can you tell me how to do this? Well, they'll probably say, go to YouTube because everything's on there. But
Hey, I speak up for you too.
you can figure out most anything on YouTube. But those resources, if you don't know about them, they're sitting right there for you to use. So, I tried to get a list together of referrals, but that only works in my community. So I guess what I need to do is duplicate my list of all the, plumber, roofer, blah 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 blah, so somebody could fill it in if they live someplace else.
Well, and I find in my community, there's groups like Seniors Helping Seniors, or like volunteer groups that all you need to do is say, Jeepers, like I've got a crack in the drywall. Is there somebody that can help me with that? And, you may have to wait a few weeks, but, somebody's happy to help.
Yes.
And they put their name on that list. So there's so many resources in the communities that you just have to figure out where they are and go discover them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the other part of this, just going a little bit more global, is, there's political mayhem right now. The environment is, this black cloud hanging over our heads. When you're already despondent over the loss of a spouse, if you start thinking in those ways, or you turn on the news too many times, that just pushes you further down, doesn't it?
It does. And I would venture to say that all of us are grieving right now and may not even be aware of it. But, the changes that have taken place since COVID, changes that have taken place since last week, they're so fast and furious that we're grieving what life used to be like. And we need to deal with it, and we need to talk about it. But, it can get compounded, just as you said. I think that's something that maybe families get a cup of coffee with somebody and talk about those things and how they're affecting you and what you can do. Most of my friends say, I don't even turn the TV on anymore. But, what's the healthy thing to do? Wallowing in it and thinking the world's coming to an end isn't going to help.
Well, and is that too where you perhaps make those two lists, what I can control and what I can't control?
Yes, absolutely.
And especially if you're already in grief, then let's look at what I can control and just tick that off one by one by one.
Yep. Because that is, that's one of the biggest, in my estimation, causes of depression. We don't feel like we're in control. Mm-hmm. We can't do anything. We can't do anything right. And so if we can just find a little piece of something, you might not be able to control the whole thing, but something, and you certainly, are responsible for your own attitude and your response. But when you're deep in grief, that's kind of hard to handle sometimes.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's like one more thing piling on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, the answer to this question might just depend entirely on the individual. But if a widow is seeking out connection, do you recommend that she finds other widows or more of an interest group, whether it's pickleball or volunteering or exercise class, whatever?
I advocate finding your people, your tribe. And I would define that as people who are not judgmental, who understand where you are and don't try to fix you, don't fill the air with platitudes, but they're willing to be there for you.
That's interesting you say that. I have been an exercise class leader for over 30 years, give or take a couple of little side trips. And those women are, over the years, they've all been in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And inevitably, when the spouse dies, the husband dies, they are back literally within a week or so, because they know they're going to walk in the door, they're going to get a hug, and then we are going to do an exercise class. And if they want to talk about it, that's great. If they just need that hug, that's great. If they just need the continuity of the class they've been coming to for the last several years.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that finding your tribe is, or your people, however you want to phrase it, is what's so important, because you're screaming inside for understanding, and not for somebody to fix you. You're not broken. You're just you're not beyond repair. You might have a broken heart, but you can move forward with it. But if you don't have people around you, it's so easy to fall into the wallowing and the poor me, and I can't believe this happened in my life. Will never be the same, and I'll never, it'll never change. I'll be stuck here forever. And you don't want to do that to yourself.
Yeah. And you said earlier too, just about, sometimes there's nothing you can say. You just sit with the person.
That's right.
And that may be a good segue into my next question, because I was going to say, like, if my friend has just lost a spouse or a child, is there a best way to support her?
The best way is love. And you don't, I really believe you don't have to say anything. If you feel like you want to say something more along the lines of, I'm here for you. I know you may not want to talk about it. I'm just going to come over and bring a book and sit with you for a while. And, if they need a hug, if they need a shoulder to cry on, provide that for people. If you see the sink is filled with dishes, just get up and take care of them. Don't ask. Just take care of the little things that you see might need to be done. And of course, if they complain, then don't do it if it's something they really don't want you to do. But then there's other little things that I've learned along the way. I remember when I was, first home from leaving Bill at the hospital and finding that he was gone. Oh my God, I got 13 by 9 pans of lasagna, tons of them, and I always tease, don't take lasagna because nobody can eat that much by themselves. But do remember that unless there's a family involved, it's just one person. So don't overwhelm them, and find something that is very easy for them to fix, because most of the time they don't want to eat anyway. So you might think of little snacks like cut up vegetables and dip, or fruit that they don't even have to cut up because there's just no energy or motivation. And sometimes I've heard of people buying what they call grief groceries, just a small amount of a few things that are simple. Leave them at the front door if you want. Just those little things. The person is not ready for big, huge things. They're not ready for any more change.
And as you said, trays of lasagna. Years ago, when a friend of mine was in her final stages of cancer, she was leaving a husband and 3 young daughters. And so within our small neighborhood, all of the rest of us women got together. And, we talked about it. Okay, well, I'll make the lasagna. You make meatloaf. You make something else. Because for a family, of course, that is handy.
Yeah.
And she had done most of the cooking. So her husband, that was going to be a learning process for her husband. But, to show up with 13 trays of big, huge trays of lasagna. Oh, my goodness.
Every time the kids came over, I was giving them lasagna. They said, Mom, we can't eat anymore.
Yeah, the whole family never looks at lasagna again. Oh, dear. Now, I had a career in residential elder care. I volunteered at hospice. So talking about death and other related end-of-life subjects is not an issue for me. Why is it such a taboo subject? Like, why are people so afraid of talking about it, let alone, dealing with the person who's lost somebody? They will avoid that person, as we said at the beginning.
Well, when a society sets up a taboo, it's something you don't touch. So that's one thing. I think another thing is that we don't know what to say. So we say things like, he's in a better place. Well, that's hurtful. The person who's grieving doesn't want to hear that. Maybe in 6 months, but not in the beginning, because what they want is that person right there. Yeah. They're just yearning for that. So just saying, I'm here for you, I think that is so powerful. Yeah, and be there for them. I mean, don't just say, I'm here for you, and disappear. Call on the phone and say, I'm just thinking about you today. Drop them a card, text, whatever. I'm thinking about you. I love you. Whatever that you can do to let people know that you care.
At what stage of the game can I, the friend, start saying, oh my goodness, I remember the time when that person did something that was fabulous or funny or whatever, like just remembering all the good parts of the person who's gone.
And like I said, I think that's so healing. I would wait until you either the person grieving says something about their spouse. You can say, oh, I remember how funny he was. Check out the reaction, so take one little dip of your toe in the water at a time. But most people find that once they start talking about someone with these memories, that it's just really healing. As a matter of fact, both my husband and my daughter's father-in-law died within 1 month of each other to the day. So those grandkids lost 2 granddads. And I gave each of them a little mason jar before, this was for Christmas, at Christmas time. And they were asked to, maybe 2 weeks before, they were asked to think about things that they loved about their granddads, that made them laugh or that they remembered. So they wrote them down and put them in the mason jar. And then when we all got together at Christmas, everybody pulled theirs out and took turns, reading them. And it turned out to be a big conversation and laughter and, oh yeah, I remember that, or, adding something on. And it was very helpful because those first holidays are tough.
Well, and especially through the eyes of children, because children don't know any of the personal politics. They don't know about prior careers necessarily. They just know about this loving grandparent, or even if it's a grumpy grandparent.
Yeah.
It's
there are always things you can giggle about, not making fun of them, but just, I remember when he did that, it was funny.
Yeah. Well, and I remember when my dad passed, my kids were 8, 9, and 10 or something, and I can remember spending the week with my mom afterwards, after the funeral. And one evening we were watching a show that my mom loved to watch on TV. And my son, I have one son, and he was being a little crude, as 10-year-old boys will be, about a bodily function. And like the good mother I was giving him dagger eyes, because his grandmother's sitting right there. She's just lost her husband, and here he's doing his bodily function jokes. And I was so mortified that I finally sort of glanced out of the corner of my eye at my mother. And she's sitting in her chair, and her body is literally shaking. She's laughing so hard at my son. And I just went, okay, obviously I'm not doing this the right way. And, so she didn't want to laugh out loud because I'm disciplining him with my eyes. I'm probably...
She was probably laughing at you too.
Yeah, probably. So I guess you really got to remember that life is real, and especially with kids.
Yep. And they're going to say what comes into their, into their mind, out their mouth. So I think that, something to remember is that children process death differently at different ages. I mean, obviously, the very early years till 3 or 4 even, they just don't get it. They don't understand.
No, for sure.
And I found that 5, 6-year-olds still will say, well, can we visit grandpa? So, you've got the primary ages and then the upper elementary school ages, and then middle school and high school are much different too, because, they're trying to find their identity, and maybe they haven't experienced death and don't know what to do. I remember when I had a grandmother that was just a quintessential grandma that baked cookies and all that, and I just adored her. And she passed unexpectedly. My parents left me with my aunt and uncle and went to the funeral, and kids weren't invited. And I told her afterwards, I said, Aunt Beth gave me a really hard time about crying, and then I needed to get up and go play with the kids. And, I didn't know how to handle it. And she said, yeah, I think we did the wrong thing. But that's what they were, they'd experienced, I imagine, in their life. So.
Well, and another story about my son is at that age, there's still so much in the moment that my former husband went into the bedroom to make sure they were getting ready to go. And my son is dressed very neatly and everything else, but he's doing a little dance singing, I'm so excited, I just can't stand it. And my husband he went crazy, very silently.
Yeah.
But I said to him, the kid is going to the funeral with his grandmother in the limo. This kid has never been in a limo in his entire life. Once he gets where he's going to be an upset grandson. But right now, the moment is, in 3 minutes, there's going to be a limo pulling up to the door for him. So it's really, you just got to, I guess, just keep all the doors open and all the conversations happening.
Keep accepting.
Tell us about Widows Rising Together.
Well, I decided that, it's kind of funny really, that I had these skills and that I wanted to help women. And then the guys were going, well, what about widowers? We have these problems too. And I always joke about, widows say, well, how do I change the tire in the car or, whatever. And the guys go, well, how do you turn the dishwasher on? It's a whole different category of stuff. But I just decided that this was something that I wanted to do. So I started this little process, and it has spread to trauma patients. I'm working with personal injury docs because they go through grief. They've lost mobility, body part, whatever. I work with people who've lost their jobs. Really, the way I look at it is anytime you lose something that affects your identity. I was a vice president. I was a manager. I was a runner. You've lost that part of who you were. And that's where I like to step in and really help people get, that all straightened out in their mind and decide, who do I want to be? And how do I get there?
My very next note here is, I saw embracing new identities on your website. What does that mean? I think you are explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it doesn't matter what you want to be as long as you're fulfilled. If you want to be a reader and sit around and just have the luxury of reading and it feels great to you, by all means. You don't have to start a business. You don't have to start a foundation. Your legacy will be that you were able to move on and live a good life, which is an important legacy to give to your family, your grandchildren, that life is worth living.
And I suppose it's one of those things too that you don't know who's watching. Your girls could well have been watching to see how you would come out of this, because that may be their future 20 years from now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a story. A little local community magazine interviewed me and put me on the front cover. And my daughter took one home, and my 7-year-old grandson looked at it. He says, "I am so proud of her." And I thought, so no, I wouldn't have expected him to say anything like that. Just really funny. I want that in my room. I am so proud of her.
Oh, that's great. And sometimes too, it takes that little bit of, for lack of a better word, notoriety for younger people to realize that, whoa, like he probably just takes grandma pretty much for granted. But if the community thinks she's important, whoa, that makes him important too.
My grandmother was on the magazine.
I think that was the important part.
She was on the front of a magazine. He didn't care what was in it.
No, exactly. But that gives him notoriety, because how many other kids in his school, their grandmas were on the front cover of any magazine, So
it's kind of funny. But, that's great. Everyone processes a little differently. You can't just make assumptions about where someone is. And lots of times they won't stay there. That those 5 Kubler-Ross 5 steps of grief are not linear. You go back and forth. Sometimes you're in 3 of them at a time.
Yeah. Now, in terms of embracing new identities, and I don't know if this is in your bailiwick or not, but sometimes you will have a widow whose husband was still a breadwinner, and now she's looking at some of that. At least some of that needs to be replaced, like some of that income.
Right.
Do you deal with women like that?
Sure. I mean, those are things we have to face. So how do you get money coming in? And I work with people around when they're in flow and identifying how they manage, how they work, how they do things pretty granularly. Like I learn by reading, I learn by doing, things like that. And then what is around them and who is around them? What is the environment like when they're in flow? They're loving what they're doing, and those things support them. And then we look at those along with the values and beliefs and other stuff that we've uncovered. And from there, I help them find a right fit. It's something that is going to be, I just hate the thought of somebody going to work every day and just dreading it. So if I can help them find something that is supportive, where they can be who they are and do things the way they do them, they're going to be much happier.
Now, you mentioned earlier that, like, even just within your own community, you have this list of people that can do things, whatever. And I'm thinking everything from a plumber through to a financial planner.
Right.
You want to know that this person can identify with a widow, knows how to talk to that person, makes them feel comfortable, that whole thing. Is that something that some of our listeners could be doing within their own community? It's just like...
Yes. I have created some programs for real estate agents, for lawyers, for financial people, to help them understand what to do and what to say. Because, most of them, they experience this a lot. They have a box of Kleenex on their desk, and they don't know what to do other than hand the box to the person. And it makes them uncomfortable, and then the person grieving is uncomfortable because they're embarrassed. And that is something that I think help break down the taboos around talking about this.
Well, and I know I've interviewed, I guess like a financial planner comes to mind, who deals specifically with widows or women. And so, like you go in, I mean, you've still got to make sure they're a good fit, the personality, everything else. But at least if you know that that's their field of focus, then there's a much better chance than, some high-flying person in a huge company and you're just going to be a number.
Right. It's kind of funny. I have suggested before that people vet someone through a business group like BNI where they trust each other and they refer to each other because they know that somebody does a really good job. And that might be a place to start trying to find people. You talk to other people in the group and say, what's their personality like? How do they interact with older people? Those kinds of things. And then you can do some referrals too to them.
Well, I'm thinking too about my exercise class. I'd say over half of them are widows. So for them to even get together and say, okay, like, who do you use as a financial planner? Are you comfortable with them? Do you have a plumber? Do you have a mechanic? Like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I know. Handymen are impossible to find. So those are big deals. And I think that's a great thing for people to create a list together and share.
Yeah. And I mean, the last thing you want is somebody who can do the job really well, but you don't want to be treated like a stupid little woman. So, okay, we're digressing here.
Well, I think most of us have, or many of us have experienced being taken for granted or being ripped off.
Or being talked down to.
Yeah. I had to get a new roof, and one guy came in and told me my roof was all wet, the attic was all wet, and pretended he had pictures. Next people came in and they said, no, we took pictures as dry as a bone up there. So
they see dollar signs. Some of them see dollar signs. Yeah. What haven't I asked you that you want our mid-age demographic to be considering, to think about? And I guess we got the ones out there that are still have spouses that are well enough, and then there's the other ones that have suffered the loss.
Don't let yourself get into what we call prolonged grief that lasts several years. It's detrimental. It can kill us. It messes up our health. It messes up our mental capabilities. Get some help. And I want people to understand that they don't have to go through this alone. Find somebody like me who knows what they're doing, is skilled, has credentials, and let them take you by the hand and walk you through the process. I think one of the things we forget is that if we go back and think through our life, kind of like a little timeline, we will see that we have been given different experiences and skills and knowledge at different points along the way so that we do have what we need right now. We just need to learn how to access it and use it. And sometimes you can't do that alone, so work with somebody. But it's all there. You're strong. You can do this.
I love it when guests sort of give me this whole, we didn't talk about that. But you said don't let it last for years. I am acquainted with people who have lost a spouse and the clothes are still in the closet 2 years along.
Yeah. Well, I've got somebody that's 10 years along. Yeah. And just can't get past it. And that's true. And I would say don't do anything about it until you're comfortable with it. But 2 years, that's a long time to hang on to stuff that somebody else could use, that you would be honoring your spouse by providing clothing for somebody that doesn't have them. If you can think of it that way, some of those things will be easier to let go of. And I understand it's hard to let go of things.
I have a friend whose father passed away a number of years ago, and if we get together for a cup of tea or a glass of wine or something, it's not unusual to see her wrapped in one of her dad's sweaters. Everything else is gone. She kept the one sweater that he loved wearing, and she loved him in it. And, so it's not like you have to go carte blanche, clean it all out.
No, and she's not using it as a excuse to, excuse for anything. She just likes it, which is fine.
Yeah, and she feels her dad's arms are wrapped around her every time she curls up on the couch, so it's kind of nice, yeah.
And what a lovely thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at app.widowsrisingtogether.com. And yes, I have an app.
Yeah, no, because I'm looking over here at something called actionera.com. Widows Rising
Oh, it
Together.
should be
But
app.
I'm in.
Actionera owns the apps, but it should just be app, not Actionera.
So it's app dot. Oh, jeepers, I'm on the wrong page now. So say that again. App dot
widowsrisingtogether.com.
This is great. I love it. You're the second person in 6 years that's had their own app that I
Well,
know
the
of.
reason I have the app is that I don't have it filled out yet, but I thought, if I could do some meditations or some music, put it on there. If somebody wakes up in the middle of the night and they're beside themselves, they could access it really easily on their phone.
Yeah, and it strikes me that you've got that sort of voice as well.
I do.
I have a meditation.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I have a meditation app, and there's some sleep things, and I'll turn it on, and I'll go like, no, that voice isn't going to relax me into sleep.
Okay, you could have said you're boring. That would work.
Well, no, it's not. But it's not. No, it's not boring. It's soothing. It's soothing. No, trust me. I don't listen to those stories that are so boring. You just, I can do that the best of times. Ah, dear. May I ask you a personal question before we close?
Sure.
Are you a traveler?
I love to travel. I've just kind of started traveling. And one of the things that I want to do is to offer some travel experiences that are transformational so that people go through a week of doing things that really help them transform and into the person who can move forward, who is giving and, learn more about themselves, all those sorts of things. Yeah.
So would that be like a 1 week retreat to Cancun, or would it be a local
It could be
thing?
a cruise. It could be going to Washington, D.C. and doing a lot of stuff with the museums and music and, theater. What I try to do is connect any activity with the transformation we're trying to get. Okay. So it's educational, and people bond like, oh my goodness, and have huge breakthroughs, which is that.
Well, and given the demographic that usually takes cruises, you're going to have the cruise lines lining up to have you come on board. They're going to pay for everything. They're probably going to pay you a stipend. Jeepers, we're never going to see you again.
Oh, no, yeah. Well, I'll never see my dogs either. That won't be good.
Well, no, there's a cruise line out there, I'm sure, that will.
There are now. There are.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I was on a cruise in January, and I saw a little dog in a corner with a little mat doing its thing.
Okay. So I'm suggesting to you, too, that there's a whole bunch of other widows out there who say, well, that's fine, except I can't leave little Bowser.
Yeah.
And so, to have 20 women who can bring their little companions, because those companions are often the one thing that keeps them getting up in the morning.
That's right. Absolutely. It did me in the beginning because I just wanted to pull the covers over my head. But dog needed to go out, and I needed to feed her, and
oh my goodness. I'll be honest, I went to your Pinterest.
Oh, you did?
And and I'm going like, okay, there's a lot of travel stuff for different cultures, different countries here.
I love cultures. Yeah, I love to find out about people in different cultures. I just, people are a real interesting subject for me.
No end to it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like that bottomless cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kids. I love to do things for kids.
Okay. So that'll be your next
I think
iteration.
I'm growing out of it. I used to be very creative about holiday dinners and, setting the table just so, and having like a watermelon throwing up at Thanksgiving or at Halloween or something, the kids would like. I had them bobbing for apples one year, and nobody does that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I was going to say, I still love the concept of that, but I'm so out of practice.
Well, you do what my, at the time, 2-year-old granddaughter did. She watched everybody, and she went up and and then she grabbed an apple and ran away.
Well, I'm just thinking about even those big, huge traditions.
Yeah.
Like the big dinners. I'm notorious now because once again, as everybody gets older and there's more people, there's more, I don't like this, I like that, I don't eat this. I have what I call my bit dinners. And I load up the sideboards, and I load up the table with a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the next thing. And if you can't find something to eat, that's your problem.
That's right. It's like a giant charcuterie board.
Yeah, exactly. The days of those big turkey dinners that I loved doing back in the day.
Did too.
That's the thing of the past now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing is very often you need to change traditions. I know I couldn't go to my daughter's on Thanksgiving the first year. I just couldn't do it. And then at Christmas came around, and I thought, I don't want to do a big dinner. I can't sit there and look at an empty chair. So we changed our traditions, and we're loving what we're doing, and it's been fine. The kids don't want to do all that fancy stuff anyway.
Well, I find my daughters now, it's just like, I'm not going to cook a turkey dinner, Mom. So, at least not for 20 people. Oh, dear, that's great. Okay, your website link is in the show notes. All of the links will be on your page at our website.
Okay.
Listeners, have you lost someone close to you? Do you fear losing a long-term partner? Have you even just given it any thought? Please share your experiences with us. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at boomwithabang.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and talk to us there. Was there a question I didn't ask, Lynn? Ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. Share this episode. We're at the age where the loss of someone close is more likely than it was 20, 30 years ago. Facing that reality before it happens might help when the time comes. Maybe a friend is struggling after the loss of their partner. Lynn's words might give them some solace. If you appreciated this conversation, click the follow button at your favorite podcast platform. That helps us grow. I'm also registered at Substack. Following there is free, and you get notified every time an episode is released. Lynn Banis, thank you for being my guest today and sharing your own experiences, but also assuring all of us that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel as long as we keep moving through the tunnel.
That's right. And you don't have to leave your spouse behind. I'll teach you how to carry them with you. Honor what was in your new life. Important.
Oh, my goodness.
And thank you so much for having me.
No, that's great. Nothing like the voice of experience. Have a great rest of week.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.